Hey there, welcome. Today I want to talk about objectification, stigmatization, and popularization. So, objectification, what I mean by this is similar to how we use it to speak about women, but how we do this to everything. So, with objectification, we take the idea of something, usually as a physical form. For women, it's often a shape and a behavior system. So we take certain shapes of women and we take a behavior system, so an external pattern, and we want them to fit that pattern. So it's an object in our minds that we want people to fit. For women, it's often related to sexual pleasure, sexual appearance, and so on. For men, it can be less so, but similar, certain physical appearances and certain behavior patterns, like how they work, how they operate in the world in terms of maybe finances or support and stuff. This is not universal. This is not how everybody treats each other. But I'd be willing to bet most people objectify most other people to some extent, even if nuanced and tiny. However, we objectify pretty much everything. This is a very difficult thing to overcome. And I think this is why, even with many years of feminism and anti-objectification of women, we still have a lot of it. And there's reasons beyond what I'm going to talk about. So maybe, vested interest, sex sells, ulterior motives to desensitize people to overt sexuality, the hypersexualization of children, all sorts of possibly problematic things that are occurring in the world that make objectification stronger and stronger, even if we have lots of feedback about doing it less. But we do it to nature. We objectify ecosystems to our pattern, to our shapes. You'll even see a vineyard and you'll see the grapevine almost spread like legs to produce fruit in a specific way so that it's easy to harvest and produces many. Even apple trees will be confined and pruned to be tiny and thin and tall, and then we can have many, many, many of them side by side to make it easier to harvest the apples and make bigger apples. So we objectify Mother Nature for almost all our resources and consumerist habits. We objectify foreign workers to be a certain way and live a certain way, so that we can have food, we can have textiles, we can have, even technology, it requires minerals from all sorts of areas on this planet that involve usually and often exploited workers in less developed countries that have less wealth, countries that, maybe could be wealthy with how many resources they have, but we've created a system of exploiting them and making things unequal. And this is riddled throughout our whole day-to-day life based on materialism and consumerism. So I think even after all the talk of don't objectify others, don't exploit others, don't objectify women especially don't objectify kids, it still happens, because we actually are doing that consciousness program most of the time. For almost all the things we do, we objectify the world. We objectify people, animals, and plants, and environments that we don't see. We don't see how they're affected. We make them a certain shape. We make them do a certain pattern. So this is the mental object fitting this boundary, and we want it to happen every day, all the time, until we die. And then our kids do the same thing. Now, I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm eating food. This is on a phone. I have a computer, I have pillows, like it is not easy to leave because it's just embedded in the system. That doesn't mean do nothing. It just means we have to figure out where we can actually make changes. But I also want to dive into how we objectify things even further, because I've made a couple videos about how morality and ahimsa and karma fit in with spiritual progression, especially in the non-dual awareness, when we realize that it's just one, not one conceptually, one reality. And so we're all in this together. So when we realize that, it begets a certain level of morality without complaint, without justification. And that's a funny thing that happens. So I've made videos on that already, where we spiritually bypass our moral responsibilities, and so we become talking heads about unity and oneness and God and infinity and non-duality, instead of actually living it, because we actually push ourselves away from our innate power, from our full awareness, when we harm other people, when we harm other animals, because they are just us. So we relinquish our birthright of infinite oneness temporarily when we try to justify harming other beings. Because to fully be infinite, you must include all. But I'm not here to talk about that. I've spoken about that in length. I'll probably speak in length about that more. I apologize for the lighting. It's just super sunny and it feels good to have it on my face. So you probably see high contrast, but that's fine. It's just a video. We objectify in interesting ways through stigma. So it's like almost like anti-objectification. It's like, we objectify not just by wanting people to be a certain way, but we objectify by really not wanting them to be these other ways. And so it pushes people away from certain patterns, stigmatizes their freedom, and push them towards patterns we like. So this is part of objectification. It's what I call stigmatization and popularization. And one thing we need to do to make this a better world is we really need to live that non-dual unity, that oneness, which means we need to cooperate and build communities beyond the simple skills of communication and harmony and tolerance and forgiveness and self-reflection and habit changing and emotionality control. There's all sorts of psychological and practical things we need to do to really learn how to become capable of community and cooperation, which I've spoken a little bit about, and there'll be more videos about all that stuff. But one thing that's important is we can't just assume our stigmas to be right, and we can't assume our popularization trends to be right, even if we aren't like the normal ones. Even if we are in the more new age, health-oriented communities, spiritual communities, we can't take for granted that the things we think are valuable and good and healthy in fact are, and the things we think are bad are bad. We have to question those things. One, to get the truth, so that we're not holding illusory false beliefs within our consciousness. That's the spiritual portion, for our own enlightenment, our own awakening, our own remembrance of truth, but also for the community. These aren't effective patterns. The only stigmas we should really place are highly dangerous patterns like murder, rape, theft, arson, exploitation, abuse. Like the things that really cause detrimental harm to others. These are the things we should actively stigmatize. We should really try to not sugarcoat those things. Because when we do sugarcoat those things, people feel okay to do them. But there are certain things that are not okay to do. And for the most part, most people, I'd say, get that. They get that like murder and sexual assault is like, these are huge no-nos. These are huge taboos. Unfortunately, that's not every human that thinks that, but I'd say most do, which is ideal. I think that's why these are some of the most, illegal activities. But it's more the subtle thing. So I don't feel I would be comfortable in a lot of more spiritual yogic communities for a few reasons. So on one end, I don't stigmatize sexuality, orgasm, enjoyment of that part of life, which is the part of life that gave us life, that made us. So it doesn't make any sense to stigmatize it. But at the same time, I think it's inappropriate for people to live, unconsensual polyamorous life, trying to take other people's partners from them and flirt and trying to cross boundaries and doing it with the sense of like, oh, this is our true freedom and nobody should possess each other. And one that can be common, this sexual frustration and pulling, and it can become problematic, where we ruin other people's timelines, where we affect their timelines very strongly just to get off, just to orgasm a bit with somebody. Like it's not worth it, orgasms and making life is awesome, but it's not worth affecting people's life. It's not worth changing their whole future just so we can feel physical pleasure. Where there's physical pleasure that we can access without them and beyond them, beyond the other. So it's more important to learn how to do that. But it's also important to not stigmatize someone for enjoying their body. That's just a possible repression that can happen, and maybe more monastic leaning, like, traditional communities trying to live more yogically or monkly. But then there's some that I find even more common, and this is this weird stigma upon enjoying entertainment and art. And so it's funny. It's like, in my experience, shows and video games are stigmatized a lot. So watching shows and playing video games are highly stigmatized, it seems. And I'm like, I don't understand this. This is coming from people that still drive cars, that still scroll something, Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, or people that still love the pleasure of foods and desserts and things that they don't need, even things that might harm another life, like cheese or milk or ice cream. People that just have all their own patterns that are also just their enjoyment, but they stigmatize other people enjoying these things. This is really weird to me. Like, I just don't, like, it just seems so odd. And I think part of it comes from our parents, part of it comes from this need for productivity. And this is all part of objectification. We objectify the lives of other people. Other people need to be productive. They need to be successful. They need to fit my images for me to have them around, fed with shelter. Like, this is absurd to think that we are so greedy and fucked up that we aren't willing to have people fed with shelter. Like, that's the basic human needs. The two basic human needs are, you have food that's healthy, and you have a roof over your head to stay away from the weather, especially in northern countries. Every community I've ever been stigmatizes entertainment, except the very few limited ones they like. And I think that this is absurd for many reasons. One, it's hypocritical. You find someone that doesn't have a thing that they find entertaining, that isn't necessary, that they don't need to do, that maybe they could be doing something better. even if that's like researching Buddhist texts, or doing yogic practices to escape the world, escape sociality, exercising excessively to, produce surface level appearances of their body, which relate to all these different objectification patterns. That's all fine for a lot of people, but then you play some video games or you watch some shows, and there's this weird stigma. There's this weird hate, this weird judgment. And this is a problem. This is a problem because these are art forms created by humans with the impulses of existence, which is God, and some of us are gonna like them, and some of us aren't. And that's fine. That's okay. The problem will come if, you agreed upon a contract where, let's say, you help out a community or a co-housing situation and you do gardening and, you aid in the patterns that be, but you're instead avoiding those agreed upon contracts in exchange for, binge watching Netflix or something. Yeah, this becomes a problem because, not because you're watching Netflix, but because you lied. You went back on your word. You aren't a trustworthy individual. That's the problem. It's not what you're doing, it's the fact that you didn't do what you said you'd do. But otherwise, in your free time, like if you practice handstand versus, watch the OA, I don't care. Why would I care? How does that affect me? Why should I react? Why would I make that something that stirs my emotions so much that I start thinking about having you not have shelter and food? It's so not compassionate. It's so not spiritual. It's mind-boggling that these are problems. And I've seen so many people do this. So many people, it's crazy. And yet they all have their own little addictions, their own little vices that they justify. And the funny thing is, almost all of those vices I've seen cause way more harm than playing a game or watching a show. I've seen people buy a motorbike, like super spiritual people teaching Vipassana, buy a super expensive motorbike for no good reason, supporting huge chains of resource extraction because it's a whole machine that costs money, that could be used to help others, and it still consumes gas. You can only use it part of the year in Canada because it gets cold and wet. I've seen people cheat on their diets and purchase animal products and junk food that support huge corporations and the destruction and torturing of animals. That causes way more suffering as a little enjoyment than I turn my tiny screen on and I play a game for a bit. Not that doesn't use anything, it uses data centers and servers around the world possibly, uses some electricity, but if you do the research, it's a lot less harm than a lot of people's desires. Some people that don't play any of that stuff, but they like to go on big trips to Bali and Mexico and, Cancun or Indonesia, India. Well, the flights are some of the most dangerous things to the atmosphere, and so unless you needed to go for some kind of emergency or something really important, there's an argument to be made that you're causing more harm, but this isn't looked down upon, right? If people are exercising and showboating and trying to make a certain image, whether it's physical and or social, to fit a certain pattern, well, this is also super toxic. This isn't a healthy mindset. It's always relying on the validation of others. It's always relying upon other people praising you, other people giving you attention. But someone that's just happily and content in their corner, enjoying some entertainment that's there in the world, I'm not gonna lie, I think that's a smarter consciousness, to just enjoy what's here rather than trying to appear a certain way. and then promoting other people to like strive for certain appearances. Like this is also part of the objectification, where we stigmatize these certain patterns that don't actually cause that much harm, but then popularize other patterns like just doing the physical practice of yoga, or looking sexy, or having objects that look bohemian, even if they come from child labor, or you support a corporation that's overcharging people and thus like exploiting the world a little bit. There's so many issues with just the things that get popularized, because they're still just pumping energy towards that consumerist machine, which we know we need to we need to pull away from. It can make it so people are insecure still and confused and not actually engaging with enlightenment and with love, because it's so appearance based, it's so aesthetic based, and this is so common. Like it's just so common, and I find that this can happen in the more spiritual communities, which is where I've been in maybe a few, or more like farm communities, like down to earth communities trying to do good. But yeah, then there's this weird stigma towards just sometimes enjoying life in the way you want to enjoy life, and then this weird popularization of like fitting the bill, fitting the appearances. But all that happens in the modern world too. Like our parents would like sit in the garage drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, and then watch TV and complain about life while I'm there playing games, and they're judging me. Like they're just complaining about me playing games and thinking I'm bad. But it's just like, well, everything you're doing is way worse. Like it's worse for your health, it's worse for the world, it's worse for your mind. We have science to show all of that. And I did play excessively, so there was something to moderate, but the judgments on me were hypocritical, which is why they didn't work. They didn't help me change my habits, because people were just doing just as bad, if not worse, habits and not being self-aware. And we can stigmatize a lot of stuff. We can stigmatize like certain ways of speaking, certain tones of voice, certain behavior patterns, and they might just be fine, no ill intention, nothing wrong with them. Maybe they're slightly asocial or autistic looking, but they're just humans being humans in the way that they are. Doesn't mean anything's mean about them or negative, no ill intentions, but we stigmatize them, and it kind of forces people to behave and act a certain way. We stigmatize a certain set of gestures, tones, and behaviors and vocabulary and habits, and then we popularize others. Some of the things we stigmatize, maybe being excessively obese due to unhealthiness, although I don't think perfectly pure, is a good thing to stigmatize slightly to help people become more healthy. It's not a thing to shame or hate, that doesn't work, that's just mean. But then popularizing health and love and good life living, good lifestyle patterns, this is okay. We need some level of discernment on what creates suffering, what doesn't. But beyond that, I think most of our stigmas and popularizations are just subjective, nitpicking shit that doesn't help anybody. And it's just present in everybody. Like, I've never met anyone that doesn't do it. Like, I've never met anybody that is just like completely devoid of this objectification process. And we popularize all sorts of appearances, all sorts of roles in society, so jobs, occupations, statuses, clothes, hairstyles, ways of moving our hands and ways of having our face, gestures of our mouth and eyes, tones of voices, like I said, ways of interacting and communicating. And so you really just limit the freedom of the world, and we limit our capacity to communicate, cooperate, and create harmony between each other, because we're just like constantly forcing people into these little boxes, these little mental objects. And then we just don't give them any love, attention, and generosity if they don't fit this mental image. So I just want to talk about this because I just think it's another big problem. I think it goes way beyond like women, like objectifying women sexually. That's also a big problem, and it has a weird evolution at this point, I think, especially with AI and anime and Photoshop and all this shit. But like it's mixed in with that, it's like people that get paid to exercise or be sexual, like, and then we it's just people, and women are pulled to be this certain way. Men are also pulled more and more to be this certain way, but it's like they're paid to look that way. Like they're paid to go to the gym. Like they're paid to appear a certain way, whether it's just from influencer, Instagram, or porn, or acting and so on. But most people don't, like, that's not open to everybody. It's like you don't just because you start working out, you don't just get to be paid for that. A lot of people are just going to have to pull away from that lifestyle to pay the bills, and thus they're not going to look like that, mixed in with plastic surgery and steroid use and creating alternative expectations, objectifications. That's a whole beast in and of itself that people are talking about, and I could talk about for many minutes. But we need, as a community, especially the spiritual community, we need to stop. We need to be more discerning. We need to really see, like, oh, is the thing I'm stigmatizing actually causing suffering? And if I say quickly, oh yeah, of course. Well, do I have proof? Do I really know? Is the thing I'm stigmatizing in others, does it help them get better if it is something to stigmatize? Am I stigmatizing that for X or Y reason, but do I also do something that's similar for the similar reasons? And do I accept and popularize certain patterns that do cause suffering, that do cause limitation, that limit the freedom of other beings, whether it's people in their way of gesturing and appearing, or even animals, and just the fact that they have to live in a cage or a small property and then get murdered at a young age so that we can eat them and use their excretions, or excess technology and plastic products and things that don't need, materials that put burdens on many ecosystems around the world and many cultures around the world. Well, like, should I popularize those patterns? Does that make any sense? And no, it doesn't, by the way. It just doesn't. And you might disagree because you do things, but like, it's better to be honest. We can't really like be a spiritual force for the world if we're just talking heads. We're just conceptualizing non-duality, God, infinity, enlightenment, Buddha, whatever, but not actually like living it. And the thing is, I'm the type of person that doesn't care about my past habits too much. And when the universe, God, kind of like, hey, let's change a little. Let's stop doing that. Let's stop seeing life like this. Most of the time, I'm not perfect, but most of the time I just embrace it and start to change as much as I can. Happily, usually. And I enjoy it. It's fun, because that's the smart relationship to change, is to enjoy the change. And it's not always easy. Some things I've wanted to change, but they're really slow, and there are limits in terms of just like finances and where I'm allowed to live and where I can afford to live and what I can afford to do in the world. And I feel at one point it's like, if you're expected to be a person that lives homeless and doesn't need food except once every 2 days, this is an unreasonable expectation. Nobody's going to expect that of me, honestly, without completely disagreeing about that with themselves. So it gets to a point where if someone saw my life habits and how much I eat and what I eat and how much I buy and where and when I buy and why I buy, they'd see like, oh yeah, I'm like pretty fucking strict, and I enjoy that because it's nicer for the world. I put less burden on myself because I know I'm everything, and I know we are everything. Not the idea of John is everything, but what we truly are is everything. And so, although I don't go every moment of the day remembering that, more and more often that superfluous awareness does occur. And so there's no point for me to fight it. There's no point for me to get upset about, I don't want to change. I want to keep objectifying others in the world because I enjoy some things a little bit for a temporary amount of time. And this isn't the way. This isn't how we're going to actually teach spirituality. No one's going to really evolve much, just regurgitating the same sentences over and over again. No one's going to, even the just the appearance of like, yes, I face my shadow self. And we just say it and we like fix two things. Like now we don't, I don't know. Yeah, we don't use straws or something. Or we change our habit with like our loved ones and that's it. But then there's like a billion other things to change that we ignore because we can create an identity, like a plateau upon anything. And so in the spiritual community, there's the whole all love, all light part. And then there's a like, no, face your shadow self. But then that just becomes a talking point and people don't actually do that either. And that just becomes an idea. Then there's the like, oh no, it's all God, detached from everything. That can just become an idea. It's literally, we can at any point circle a hallucination. We can circle an illusory idea, an imagination about a reality. And we can do that for a long time. And we will do that. But if the universe kind of tries to pop your bubble, gratitude is in order. And I sometimes am the one that pops those bubbles, unfortunately. Not me, it really is just the infinite. I'm not the doer. And I'm honestly not the doer. It is just a pattern that has occurred in and around me. I see other people sustain the bubbles, and for some reason, I pop them. And I've refrained from popping them for the last few years just to have food and a house. Like, I'm not even lying. Like, I've refrained from being myself and being honest and authentic and compassionate in this way because people are so reactive, so defensive, so emotionally immature that they will make it so I don't have shelter and I don't have food, I don't have income, just to not have me around. And I'm not aggressive, I'm not mean, I'm not hateful, ever. So this is my space to be honest, to hold myself and others accountable and to talk about these deeper topics because people don't handle it well. Even people around me, just some of them, just you say the word God and they react like it's a poison to their ears. And it's just kind of like people are unfortunately trained and conditioned to be weak. They aren't trained to love and understand and be wise. So they react and they cave up and they push people away. Even if that hurts that other person. If it can earnestly hurt the other person. It's not just like, I didn't like hanging out with them, so we're just not hanging out. I've been pushed away from like living situations. I've been threatened with like not getting paid, with not having a place to stay just because they don't like me a little bit. And this is from people that seem like virtuous, good people, and it's not right. And this can happen in communities, co-housing, communes, ashrams, temples, and it's fucked. Because we need to cooperate, we need to work together, We need to stop stigmatizing each other for these stupid little differences. And we need to stop popularizing limited behavior sets, routines, and appearances, and things that actually cause suffering. So I hope that speaks to you a little bit. I hope you question what you stigmatize and popularize. So thank you for listening. Om Sai Ram.